My father's grave was barely covered before Linda, my stepmother, snatched everything he left behind. Her first official act as the mistress of our home was to toss me out onto the cold pavement. "A useless brat like you has no place in this house," she hissed, her face contorted with a cruel, ugly triumph. "Your father is dead. I have no reason to harbor a jinx like you. Get out of my sight." The heavy door slammed shut, sealing what she thought was her victory. She had absolutely no clue that tucked deep inside the pocket of my worn-out coat lay a secret that dwarfed her petty theft. I was clutching a lottery ticket worth a fortune she could not dream of in 10 lifetimes. The crumbs she stole from my father were dust compared to the empire I now held in my hand. But look at us now. The arrogance has evaporated. Her golden child is lying in a hospital bed fighting for every breath, and the woman who once tossed me out like yesterday's trash is on her knees clawing at me for salvation. "Serafina, please," she wailed, her fingers digging desperately into my sleeve. "After all, he is your brother. Blood is thicker than water. We must protect each other." I felt a chill, but it wasn't fear. It was an absolute freezing calm. I didn't waste my breath on arguments. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and let the DNA results drift down to the floor between us. "Open your eyes and look closely, Linda." I said, my voice as dead as the past she tried to bury. "He is not my brother. He is your son with another man. He does not share a single drop of my blood." The funeral wreaths on my father's fresh grave hadn't even begun to brown before Linda peeled away her mask of grief to reveal the monster underneath. To me, the car crash was the end of my universe. To my stepmother, Linda, it was nothing more than a profitable transaction. She clutched the insurance payout check for $100,000, like it was a holy relic, gazing at it with a devotion she had never once wasted on my father. The second the funds cleared the bank, the purge was immediate. My suitcase hit the concrete driveway with a thud that sounded like a bone breaking. A cardboard box followed seconds later, exploding on impact and spewing my textbooks across the wet, muddy grass. "Tyler is starting university soon," Linda announced from the porch, looking down at me like a queen dismissing a peasant. "This room needs to be renovated into a proper study for a man. Move your junk out of my sight, Serafina." Her voice dripped with a sugary sweetness, but beneath it was a poison designed to humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood. I refused to give her the satisfaction of tears. I didn't even look up. I simply knelt in the mud, gathering my scattered life in silence. I had known this was coming. "Aunt Linda," I said, keeping my voice flat and controlled, "this house belonged to my father. If you force me to leave right now, how do you expect me to survive on the streets?" She crossed her arms, staring at me as if I were a cockroach staining her new patio. Tyler, my stepbrother, who was a year younger, leaned against the door frame, a smug, oily grin plastered on his face. "Your dad's house, wrong. He left it for his son, me. You are just a girl, Serafina. Know your place and get lost. We aren't running a homeless shelter here." "Linda, that is enough," the shout came from over the fence while Mr. Wilson, our next-door neighbor, stood gripping his garden hose, his face flushed red with indignation. "She is Tyler's sister, for God's sake. Her father is barely cold in the ground. How can you kick her out like this?" Linda's eyes snapped toward him, sharp as switchblades. "Mr. Wilson, I suggest you stay out of my family business. She and I share no blood relation. Her father's death is her problem, not mine." I zipped up my suitcase. It was time to close the jaws of the trap. I stood up to face her. "If your decision is final," I shouted, ensuring my voice carried to every house on the block, "then at least give me a portion of Father's insurance money. Before he died, he promised to support me through college. I have 3 years left. Give me my share, and I will go." At the mere mention of parting with cash, Linda's face twisted into a mask of grotesque greed. "Serafina, be realistic. What does a girl need a higher education for?" She scoffed, waving her hand as if shooing a fly. "Your father's money is for your brother's future. As for you, You will just get married off anyway. Why would I waste good money on an investment that walks out the door? I had endured these insults for over a decade. Once they would have cut me deep. Now they were just the leverage I needed. Fine then, I said, my voice icy. I reached into my pocket and withdrew a folded document. I smoothed it out and held it up for them to see. Just sign this. It was a legal agreement I had paid a lawyer to draft days ago. It stated clearly that I voluntarily renounced all rights to my inheritance and the insurance money. In exchange, Linda and Tyler legally severed all family ties and obligations to me. It meant they could never claim filial duty to ask me for a cent in the future. Linda hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the legal jargon. She was suspicious of anything she didn't control. But Tyler was impatient. He saw a barrier between him and his new study being removed. He snatched the paper from my hand. Just sign it, Mom. Let's get rid of her. I need to paint my room, and I don't want her hanging around begging for cash later. I handed her the pen before her suspicion could override her avarice. In front of everyone here as witnesses, I declared loudly, locking eyes with Mr. Wilson, I declare that I will not take a single cent of the compensation. Consider all ties between us severed permanently. Greed won out. Linda grabbed the pen and scribbled her signature. Tyler laughed, crumpled the paper into a ball, and threw it hard at my chest. You are useless, Serafina. Pick up your trash and vanish. I caught the paper. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I simply smoothed out the crumpled document, folded it neatly, and placed it securely in my pocket. They thought they had just saved $100,000. They had no idea they had just signed away their only connection to a multimillionaire. I did not walk away from that house in defeat. I walked away with the patience of a predator lying in wait. As I smoothed out the crumpled agreement in my pocket, my fingers brushed against a thin slip of thermal paper, a secret that made the $100,000 Linda had stolen look like pocket change. My silence was not weakness. It was a weapon forged in a decade of living hell. It started years ago. Linda had slithered into our lives, shattering my mother's marriage and driving her to an early grave. My father, desperate for a son, looked at me with disdain and exiled me to the countryside. For 9 years, my grandmother was the only shield I had against a cruel world. But even she could not survive the malice of that family. The memory is burned into my retinas. I was 9 years old, burning with a fever so high the world was blurring. My grandmother carried me on her back all the way to the city, pounding on my father's door to beg for help. She is brilliant, Stephen. She wept, her voice breaking. Please, save her. The hospital needs $2,000. My father, a coward in his own home, hid in the bedroom to avoid Linda's wrath. Linda, disgusted by our very existence, dragged us toward the emergency stairwell. Get out, she hissed. Do not stain my floors with your filth. Tyler was there. He was younger than me, but heavy and spoiled, a monster made in his mother's image. As my grandmother stood at the top of the concrete stairs, struggling under my weight, Tyler lunged. Freeloaders, he screamed. Get out of my house. He shoved her hard. Gravity took over. I felt the sickening lurch of weightlessness. My grandmother twisted her body in midair, wrapping her frail arms around me, turning herself into a human shield. We hit the landing with a bone-jarring crash. I rolled away with only scratches, but she didn't move. Her head had struck the sharp metal edge of a trash bin. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was a spreading pool of crimson blood on the gray concrete and Tyler standing at the top of the stairs smirking. She died so I could live. From that day on, I vowed I would survive long enough to bury them. I became their unpaid servant, scrubbing floors and cooking meals, enduring Linda's beatings, and my father's indifference, simply biding my time. Then the universe finally balanced the scales. 2 days before my father's car accident, I spotted a crisp $100 bill lying in the mud. Guided by what felt like my grandmother's spirit, I walked into a convenience store and bought a single lottery ticket. I didn't check the numbers until the night of the accident. While chaos erupted in the house, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the screen of my cracked phone. 5 matching numbers. Plus the Powerball. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold electric shock run through my veins. While Linda was busy planning my eviction, I had quietly taken a bus to the lottery headquarters. I wore a wig, oversized sunglasses, and a face mask, disguising myself as a middle-aged woman. I opted for the lump sum. After federal and state taxes, I walked away with $8 million. I immediately moved $6 million into high-yield trust accounts. I used the remaining $2 million to purchase a penthouse apartment in the city center paid in full under a shell company. I even legally changed my name to Serafina Evans, taking my mother's maiden name to wash away the stain of my father's legacy. Linda thought she had thrown a beggar onto the street. She had no idea she had just unleashed a multimillionaire who remembered every single scar. 6 months of silence passed. I was living in my new world, a world of crisp, clean sheets, quiet mornings, and financial security. But ghosts have a way of hunting you down, especially when they smell money. The peace shattered with a single phone call from my old high school homeroom teacher. "Serafina," Mrs. Gable's voice was tight with strain. "I didn't want to disturb you, but your stepmother and stepbrother have been coming to the school every day. They are screaming at the administration, demanding your new address. They say you abandoned them." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew exactly what that meant. They had burned through the insurance money. "I will handle it," I told her. I unblocked Linda's number and sent a single text Starbucks on 5th and Main. 2 p.m., come alone. She didn't come alone. I was sitting in a corner booth nursing a latte when Linda marched in. She looked different. The stress lines around her eyes were deeper, carved by panic, but she was draped in flashy, expensive clothes that screamed new money, trying too hard. A massive, gaudy diamond ring glittered on her finger like a beacon. Trailing behind her wasn't Tyler. It was a young man I didn't recognize. Slicked back hair, tight designer jeans, and a smirk that made my skin crawl. Linda spotted me and stormed over, slamming her expensive handbag onto the table with a heavy thud. "Serafina," she shrieked, drawing the attention of half the cafe. "I have been looking everywhere for you." "Why did you block my number?" "Were you afraid I would ask for a handout?" She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound like breaking glass. "Don't worry. I am not here to beg from a dropout." I set my cup down slowly. "Get to the point, Linda. What do you want?" She sat down, preening with her ring. "Tyler." "Well, Tyler had a little trouble at school. He was expelled. Unfairly, of course, but it is a blessing in disguise. He wants to study abroad in the United Kingdom. A fresh start." She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with predatory intent. "Tuition and living expenses are high. About $50,000. As his sister, you need to help your brother." I stared at her, genuinely amazed by her audacity. "Help him? I am a student living on scholarships. Where do you think I would get $50,000? And why don't you use the $100,000 you took from Dad's insurance?" Linda waved her hand dismissively. "That money is tied up in investments. Look, I found a solution for you." She smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb. "I found you a husband, Richard. You know him. His father owns the big construction company in town." I froze. Richard. Everyone knew Richard. He was nearly 40 years old and suffered from a severe intellectual disability that made him prone to violent outbursts. His family had been trying to buy a wife for him for years to serve as a glorified caretaker. "He is from a good family," Linda purred. "They are offering a $30,000 dowry. That will cover a huge chunk of Tyler's tuition. You marry him, you get a rich husband, and your brother gets an education. It is a win-win." My blood turned to ice. She wasn't asking for a loan. She was selling me. "Aren't you ashamed?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You want to sell me to a mentally disabled man so you can fund your son's vacation in Europe. If you need the money so badly, why don't you marry him yourself? Linda's face turned purple. She wasn't used to the new Serafina. She stood up, raising her hand to slap me. You ungrateful little... I caught her wrist in midair. My grip was iron. I stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and delivered a slap that echoed through the cafe like a gunshot. Crack. He is your son, Linda, I shouted, releasing all the anger I had held for 10 years. Not my brother. I am not your property. Hey. The young man with the slicked hair lunged forward, grabbing my arm roughly. Babe, did this brat just hit you? Babe. I looked at Linda, then at the boy who was younger than me. The realization hit me like a punchline. Listen to this, everyone, I yelled, turning to the shocked patrons. My father hasn't been dead 6 months, and this woman has already spent his life insurance money on a boy toy. And now she is trying to sell her stepdaughter into a forced marriage to pay for her son's school because she spent it all on him. The cafe erupted. Phones came out. The boy toy. Oliver looked around nervously, realizing the cameras were rolling. I looked straight into the security camera in the corner. I knew the owner of this cafe. Grace was a senior from my university, and I knew she was watching. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the world to see it. Blue and red lights flashed against the cafe windows, turning the chaos inside into a silent film of justice. Grace, the owner, didn't waste a second. She handed the USB drive containing the security footage directly to the lead officer. The police watched the screen in silence. They saw the truth play out in high definition. Linda's screeching demands, the twisted proposal of a $30,000 dowry, her raised hand attempting to strike me and Oliver's aggressive thug-like intervention. Ma'am, the officer said, turning to Linda. His face was a mask of pure disgust. Attempting to coerce a young woman into a marriage for financial gain is a serious crime, and assaulting a civilian in a public place. You are very lucky. Miss Evans is not pressing charges right this second. They were escorted out in handcuffs. Linda screamed obscenities the entire way to the cruiser, her dignity dissolving with every curse word. But the real war wasn't fought in the interrogation room. It was fought in the court of public opinion. As I walked out of the precinct, Tyler was waiting. He had been called to pick up his mother, and he looked like a cornered animal. When he saw me, his face twisted into a snarl. He lunged his fist raised high. You ruined everything. He screamed, his voice cracking with rage. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a lethal whisper so only he could hear. Go ahead, Tyler. Hit me. Then you can join your mother in a cell for assault. He froze his fist, trembling in the air, caught between violence and self-preservation. You think I am the problem? I whispered, planting the seed that would tear them apart. Your mother spent $100,000 in 6 months. On what your tuition numb? She spent it on him. I nodded toward Oliver, who was sulking by the squad car, checking his hair in the side mirror. Open your eyes, Tyler. She is bankrupting your future to keep a boyfriend who is the same age as you. Think about it. If she gets pregnant, if she has another kid with him, you will be the next one kicked out onto the street. Just like me. I saw the exact moment the poison entered his bloodstream. Tyler's eyes widened. He looked at Oliver, then back at the station door where his mother was being processed. The doubt had taken root. The next morning, I woke up to a digital hurricane. A clipped, heavily edited version of the cafe video had gone viral. It only showed the split second where I slapped Linda. The audio of her trying to sell me was conveniently muted. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Ungrateful stepdaughter assaults grieving widow." The internet turned on me instantly. Monster. Abuser. She belongs in jail. Linda and Tyler saw blood in the water. They launched a TikTok account called The Grieving Family. They live-streamed daily shedding crocodile tears about how I had abandoned them, how I beat them, how I stole their father's hard-earned money. They became overnight sensations. Sympathy donations poured in like rain. They signed a contract with a shady media agency to sell diet pills and cheap cosmetics. They were making thousands of dollars a day off my name. I watched from my penthouse sipping tea. I let them climb. I let them get arrogant. I waited until they signed contracts with strict morality clauses. Then, the night before their biggest scheduled broadcast, a mega sale event predicted to bring in 6 figures, I pressed the button. I uploaded the raw, unedited footage from the cafe. The audio was crystal clear. I found you a husband, $30,000 dowry, pay for Tyler's school. Then I uploaded the police report. Then I uploaded photos of the bruises Linda had left on me during my childhood, time-stamped and saved in my old cloud drive. The internet didn't just turn, it snapped. The comments on their live stream shifted from "we love you" to "human traffickers" in seconds. The media agency, Panic, called canceling their contract immediately and citing the violation of the morality clause. They were sued for breach of contract. They owed millions in penalties. In the chaos, Oliver saw the ship sinking. He accessed Linda's joint account, drained every cent of the donation money, stole every penny left from the insurance, and vanished into the night. When Tyler found out the money was gone, he didn't cry. He exploded. A neighbor across the street filmed the fight through their window. It showed Tyler screaming at his mother, throwing vases, demanding the money for his future. It ended with him shoving Linda backward into a glass display cabinet. She was rushed to the hospital, covered in blood. The grieving family was dead. But I wasn't done. I had one final card to play. It took me 3 days to track Tyler down to a grime-coated 24-hour gaming lounge on the edge of town. The blue glare of the monitor reflected in his hollow eyes, illuminating a boy who looked like a refugee from his own life. Disheveled, broke, and terrified of the police warrant hanging over his head. I pulled up a chair next to him. He flinched violently, raising his arm to block a blow that wasn't coming. "Relax," I said, sliding a fresh pack of cigarettes across the scarred table. "I'm not here to lecture you, Tyler. I'm here to offer you a way out." He looked at me with deep suspicion, his hands shaking. "Why would you help me?" "Because I hate Linda more than I hate you." I lied, my voice smooth as silk. "She ruined my life. She ruined your life, and she let that gigolo steal your inheritance." I leaned in closer, invading his space. "I have a plan. We can make money, serious money, but you have to do exactly what I say." The plan was simple, the redemption arc. I set up the live stream myself. I coached him on every line, every pause, every tremble of the lip. When the camera went live, tears were already streaming down his face, aided by a dab of onion juice I had applied to his collar. He apologized to the world. He blamed his violence on a mental breakdown caused by his mother's betrayal. He painted himself as the tragic victim of Oliver and Linda's greed. The internet, fickle and hungry for drama, began to listen. The view count climbed. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. Then I signaled the main event. "Tyler," I said from off camera, playing the role of the supportive, forgiving sister perfectly, "there is someone here who wants to meet you. Someone who says he can help." I opened the door. A man walked in. He was older, his face weather-beaten, wearing a cheap suit that looked like it had been slept in. His name was Frank. "Son," Frank said, his voice trembling with an emotion he had rehearsed for hours. The chat went wild. "Who is this?" "What is happening? I am Frank," the man said, looking directly into the camera lens. I am Tyler's biological father." I watched Tyler's face. The shock was genuine. He looked at me, panic rising in his eyes. I nodded reassuringly. "Go with it," my eye said. "It is part of the show." But it wasn't a show. I had tracked Frank down weeks ago. I had stolen a hair sample from Tyler's pillow before I was kicked out. The DNA test was in my bag, signed, sealed, and undeniable. Tyler wasn't my father's son. He was the product of a sordid affair Linda had years ago with this debt-ridden gambler. My father had raised a cuckoo in his nest for 18 years without ever knowing the truth. Frank hugged a stiff, confused Tyler, while the donation counter ticked upward. I have been looking for you, son. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I am here now. I have a villa in the countryside. Come home with me. Leave this mess behind. Tyler, desperate and cornered, saw a lifeline. A rich dad. A villa. It was the escape hatch he had prayed for. He left with Frank that night, convinced he had just won the lottery. He didn't know that Frank didn't have a villa. He had a dying son. Frank's youngest child, with his current wife, Rose, was in end-stage renal failure. They needed a kidney. They didn't have the money for a black market transplant, and the waiting list was 5 years long. But then I called them. I told them about Tyler. I told them about the genetic match. The villa was a rented, dilapidated farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. 3 days later, Tyler woke up groggy. He wasn't in a bedroom. He was in a basement that had been converted into a makeshift clinic. The air smelled of bleach and rusty iron. Dad, he croaked, his vision swimming. Frank was standing over him, but the loving father act had vanished. He looked desperate, sweating profusely. Beside him stood a man in scrubs, who looked more like a butcher than a surgeon. I'm sorry, son, Frank muttered, refusing to look him in the eye. Your brother needs it more than you do. You have 2 kidneys. You only need 1 to live. Tyler tried to scream, but leather straps held him down. Suddenly, the basement door crashed open. Get away from him. It was Linda. I had sent her the location. I had sent her a single text. Frank has him. He is taking his kidney. She looked like a banshee, bandages still wrapped around her head. From Tyler's assault, her eyes wild with maternal terror. She held a kitchen knife in her shaking hand. Linda, don't be stupid, Frank growled, stepping forward menacingly. We need the money, or the kid dies. He is my son, Linda screamed. She lunged. Frank didn't step back. In a move of pure cowardice, he shoved his wife, Rose, directly into the path of the blade to protect himself. The knife sank into Rose's chest with a wet thud. She gasped, her eyes going wide, and collapsed. Chaos erupted. Frank roared in fury and charged Linda. In the confusion, the surgeon fled up the stairs. Tyler, adrenaline cutting through the sedatives, ripped one arm free from the restraints. He saw the bloody knife on the floor. He grabbed it. He swung blindly as Frank tackled him. The blade buried itself in Frank's shoulder, but the momentum threw them both backward. Tyler's head slammed violently into the sharp corner of a heavy metal surgical table. Crack. The sound was sickeningly familiar. It was the exact same sound my grandmother's head had made, hitting the trash bin all those years ago. Silence fell over the basement, broken only by Rose's gurgling breaths and Linda's wails. I watched the live feed from the hidden camera I had planted in the basement rafters. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. I would like to report a murder in progress, I said calmly. The violent strobe of police lights painted the farmhouse in alternating washes of blood red and bruised blue. From the safety of my darkened car parked just down the road, I watched the finale of my orchestration play out. Frank was dragged out, first kicking and screaming against the cuffs, his voice cracking as he howled about being framed. The charges were already piling up, like bricks kidnapping, attempted organ trafficking, and manslaughter for the death of his wife, Rose. Then came the stretcher. Tyler was breathing, but the brother I knew was gone. The brutal impact to his skull had caused severe, irreversible brain damage. The doctors later confirmed that he would possess the cognitive function of a 5-year-old for the rest of his natural life. He would never understand the betrayal. He would never know that his own father had tried to sell him for spare parts. Aunt Linda. She sat on the rear bumper of an ambulance, wrapped tight in a foil shock blanket, her eyes staring into a void where her life used to be. In a single night, the board had been wiped clean. Her money was gone with Oliver. Her lover was a fraud. Her ex-lover was a butcher. And her golden child, The son she had sacrificed her soul to protect was now nothing more than a broken doll. But the final twist of the knife wasn't physical, it was financial. The media agency sued her for breach of contract, demanding millions. The hospital bills for Tyler's lifelong specialized care spiraled into astronomical figures. She was utterly destitute. To survive, she had to make a choice she had once tried to force upon me with a smile. 1 month later, a cheap cardstock envelope arrived in my mailbox. The wedding of Linda and Richard. Richard, the mentally disabled man from the wealthy construction family, the very same man she had tried to sell me to for a $30,000 dowry. His family was desperate for a live-in caretaker, someone possessing enough desperation to endure his violent tantrums and change his soiled sheets. Linda needed a roof over her head and money to pay for Tyler's facility. She didn't sell her daughter. She sold herself. That night I sat in the silence of my penthouse watching the city lights glitter below like scattered diamonds. I held the crumpled agreement from the day of my eviction, the paper that had started it all. I pulled a lighter from my drawer and touched the flame to the corner of the document. I watched the paper curl, turning from white to black to gray ash in the crystal ashtray. "Goodbye, Grandma," I whispered into the dark. The fire burned bright for a heartbeat, then vanished, leaving only dust. I stood up, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and looked at my reflection in the glass. Serafina Evans, no longer a victim, no longer a ghost. I was finally free.